This week I had a different video planned than the one you are watching right now. I am exhausted. As you can see, I am sitting down rather than standing up, and I'm sure I look probably about as excellent as I feel. But that's the life. I am disabled, so this is just how it's going to be sometimes. Also, my ring light is making me squint a little bit because I am photosensitive today. But if I don't have it on, I look like Dracula. So there we are. This week, I am planning on talking about rejection sensitive dysphoria, being neurodivergent, and how that affects my writing. This is less of a how-to or an instructional video than it is kind of a discussion of myself and how I operate and what it's like to be me. For those of you who don't know, I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, ADHD. I have the inattentive presentation. I am autistic, I am dyslexic, I am dyscalculic, and I'm a whole bunch of other words. That ultimately just, it's easier to say neurodivergent because, frankly, who's got the time to explain all of that? Despite all of that, one of the things that comes with those disorders is something called Rejection Sensitive Dysphoria, or RSD. It's a common comorbid experience with ADHD, and whether it's a trauma response or whether it's a disorder unto itself, frankly, I think the literature's a little unclear, but psychology has a tendency to want to title things as disorders when sometimes it's just a product of life and a product of existing as a person who doesn't conform to the social expectations in society. So I appreciate that it has a name, but I'm not sure that it is a disorder that can happen in a vacuum, or if it's the kind of thing that is a product of other experiences sort of all blended into one. Now, what does this have to do with my writing? Well, one of the things you deal with a lot as an author is rejection, and it sucks. It never stops sucking. Every time you get a bad review, every time someone says, hey, I didn't really like what you wrote, every time you end up with a rejection from an anthology or by a publisher, you deal with getting told, no, this isn't as good as you think. Even working with an editor, as wonderful as my editor is, and I have nothing bad to say about her, she's a delightful human being. But even working with my editor, sometimes I get that sting of, nobody likes me, why am I doing this, I'm awful at this, and I know it's not true. The logical part of my brain is entirely aware of the fact that that is not true. I'm a pretty darn decent writer. I've been doing it seriously for about 20 years. I've been in the publishing industry for 15. I've had a lot of validation from people in positions of authority and knowledge and power, I guess, who have told me multiple times that, yeah, I know what I'm doing. But that never stops me from feeling this sense that I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm not good enough, that what I do and what I know isn't great. And the minute somebody says, well, I'm not really a big fan of this aspect of your writing, it hurts like a gunshot wound. It's horrible. Now, that isn't to say I don't want people to give me honest reviews or honest responses to my work. Like, if somebody wants to leave a 1-star review on my novel, Fallen, because they hated it for whatever reason, I fully support their right and their ability to do so. I will never tell somebody not to leave an honest review. If their honest review is 2 stars, 3 stars, 4 stars, or 5 stars, I want people to leave honest responses to my work, and I'm not trying to shut down anybody who may not like what I write. Some of it's going to be taste, because obviously not everything I write is going to be everybody's cup of tea. My main character is non-binary. She is a fallen angel. I deal with some elements of Christianity in this book. I deal with demons and all sorts of things that not everybody's into. But I know who my target market is, and knowing who my target market is, well, I think this book is something that those folks are going to enjoy, and I'm really excited about having written it, and I'm really looking forward to releasing book 2 in January. But at the same time, there's always this fear, because I know not everybody's going to like my book. If somebody who is of a more conservative branch of evangelical Christianity were to read my book, they would probably be very offended by the fact that I made my angel non-binary. And I made her non-binary explicitly because before her fall, she did not have a gender. She was essentially a shield. Not like literally a shield, but she was a shield, and she didn't need a gender in order to perform her role. And I mean, what kind of gender would you ascribe something that shows up as a wheel with eyes? Like, what gender do you give that? Does it have a gender? I don't think they reproduce sexually, and I'm not sure angelic culture is gendered. But at the same time, I do have angels with genders, usually the ones that interact with humanity, because when they descend to Earth and present themselves, the physical form they present themselves in is a reflection of who they are. Cassiel is non-binary because she doesn't view herself in that way. She doesn't see herself through that lens, and as such, there she is. And there are people who will take issues with that from a theological standpoint, folks who don't think non-binary gender should exist. There are folks who will take issue with the fact that I talk about gay marriage in my books and have a couple who is gay. So there's going to be folks who really don't like this, and if those people find my book, there's a good chance I'm going to get review bombed, and that is honestly going to suck if it ever happens. It's going to suck a lot. Because, well, yeah, any author getting review bombed or any author getting told their writing sucks, it stinks. Like, nobody enjoys that feeling. But with somebody with RSD, it's kind of more crushing because we spend our lives, neurodivergent people in general, spend our lives getting told on a frequent basis that we don't fit, we aren't good enough, our social skills don't work, that we aren't worthy being part of the group, we're oftentimes excluded from things because we don't react or behave in the way that people who are neurotypical tend to expect. And I've dealt with that my entire life. I was bullied so badly in elementary school that my mother actually pulled me out of school, and I was homeschooled for a number of years because I was different. You know, I was that kid who'd get excited and the hands would start flapping and I'd start bouncing, and I talked a lot in class, and I was always the kid with my hand up when the teacher asked a question, because despite the fact that I have ADHD and inattentive, it more manifested in the fact that my desk was a disaster than it did in disrupting class. I was very engaged, and I'm pretty darn intelligent. And when the teacher asked a question, I was right there with the answer, or I would ask questions of my teachers about things that they said. That kind of got me into trouble in college because it manifested also as challenging professors when I would hear them say something and I'd make them back up their claims because I needed to know the information. I needed the data. I wanted to be able to put the pieces together, and the amount of money that I paid for my college degree, they'd better well be willing to give me that information because I'm paying them an egregious amount of money. And that interaction didn't always go so well. And my peers oftentimes found me frustrating because I was that guy, you know, I was the squeaky wheel who was constantly like, hey, set your sources, I want information. And then the professor and I would get into a back and forth conversation about whatever it was that we were talking about in class. With all of this stuff, dealing with all of this and facing all of this, it's challenging because I'm not a people person. I can come across as a people person. If you met me at a book signing, I would be friendly, I would shake your hand, I give hugs, I try to be nice to everybody because I genuinely believe in being kind to people. I do my best, anyway. And a lot of folks, they probably, you know, people have known my entire life that I was a little different. That's why I got bullied in school so badly. But I'm not so different that people look at me in a crowd and go, ah, that's a neurodivergent person, and just pick me out. Unless they're neurodivergent themselves, but people usually notice I'm weird. And that feeling of being weird, of being a little on the outside, is something that I have dealt with my whole life. So pushing forward, looking at getting reviews of my book, and whether or not somebody likes my book, and whether or not somebody wants to read it, or, you know, how effective my marketing is, all of it kind of plays into that, and it's a challenge for me. As a writer dealing with rejection, in addition to my neurodivergence, I mean, I've had to deal with getting rejected for all sorts of things, and that's normal, it's expected. I mean, I don't expect anybody to tell me that I'm great and wonderful all the time because I need people to be like, hey, this story doesn't work, you done screwed that up, here's some data. Recently, I had a friend of mine read Fallen for the first time, and she is a minister. and she pointed out that I used some wrong terminology for a Catholic church in the book. Now, I'm not Catholic, I'm Presbyterian, so I didn't know that the ready room in a Presbyterian church is called something different in a Catholic church. Not a big deal, I'm not mad about it, and I'm really glad she pointed it out, but at the same time, there's always that little sting of, oh, I done screwed up, everything's wrong, I've screwed up everything, because with neurodivergence oftentimes comes something called emotional dysregulation. And that means that I feel emotions differently or more intensely sometimes, like I'll overreact to things that most people will be like, that's annoying, or oops, my bad. It feels like a lot bigger to me than it might to somebody who's neurotypical. And that isn't to say that I don't control my emotions or that I'm not responsible for my reactions to things, because I am. Everybody is. We're humans. We should be responsible for our reactions. But with that emotional dysregulation, it does make everything harder, because the ups are really high, the downs are really awful, and finding a balance is challenging, particularly when you're trying to learn to market, because day in, day out, I'm putting myself out in front of the public and making myself a public figure, which can draw fire sometimes. I've had people take shots at me before, and I'm okay with it. Like, it doesn't happen that often because I'm not big enough to get that kind of attention, and I don't normally say things that are controversial enough to get that kind of attention. But it's also manifested in, like, positive attention, and I don't even know how to respond to that, because I've had a number of people tell me that I'm their favorite author, and that's incredibly flattering, and it's, you know, really heartwarming, but also I'm not entirely sure what to do with it, because I'm not used to that kind of attention. You know, I've been a musician my whole life, and one of the things that comes with being a musician is playing in front of other people. And so I don't really have stage fright in exactly, like, if I'm performing in front of a group of people, I'm fine until I'm off stage and have to interact with those people, at which point I'm like, Windows shutdown noise, you know, do-do-do-do. And I'm done. I don't like being in groups of people where I have to interact. Presenting, speaking out loud, public speaking, doing things like this, I'm fine with, but if I have to interact with folks, oh buddy. And a large percentage of marketing is interaction, like, you know, people leave comments on my videos. And interacting with folks can be challenging and scary. One of the reasons I've put off doing this kind of video on YouTube for so long is because I've seen how the YouTube comment section sometimes goes on videos, and I'm terrified of that experience because I would feel it so hard, and so many of these people just kind of vent what they feel onto the YouTube comment section. And I know there's this prevailing idea of, if you can't stand the heat, get out of the kitchen. You know, if you can't take people being mean on social media, don't be on social media. And yeah, okay, I can take it, but it's still going to suck. And it's going to affect my mental health. So all of this kind of comes down to, as somebody with all of these different neurodivergent brain processes, it's different for me interacting with folks than it is for neurotypicals. That's one of the reasons my friends and I put together the Neurodivergent Publishing Conference that we're having in January. It's going to be a place for authors to talk to one another, for professionals to talk to them. We're going to be talking about flow states and all sorts of neat things. The theme of the conference is going to be tools for success. And we're looking at different things that folks who are neurodivergent can do to find success as an author, you know, manage their time more effectively, deal with time blindness or executive function problems, getting into and out of flow states, all sorts of fun stuff. I'm really excited about it because it means that it's going to help people like me. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I really appreciate it. I know I'm not as animated or as energetic as I normally am. The weather is changing, and with my Ehlers-Danlos, all of my joints hurt. I'm actually in a lot of pain, which you may or may not have noticed, and I have a migraine and just generally feel like crap. I also had a friend die a few days ago, and that's affecting my mood, as one would expect. So, thank you for being here. I appreciate it, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Take care, and have a great week.